ultimate result would be a ruling that you should have seen the car coming and gotten out of the way, because these are the ruling elites and you are the peasants. Great socialist utopia. That's where we're headed if these kind of bills get passed. If you can't get rid of the Second Amendment, the strategy that we lived through hours of yesterday, bankrupt the gun manufacturers, and then we'll be on our way. And that way, only the ruling elite will have security forces with guns, and everybody else will either walk or take the mass transportation. The ruling elite gets the private jets. And see, it's okay to just have massive amount of carbon emissions in private helicopters, private jets, big Suburbans like Al Gore used. I'd read where he was seen having an entourage of big jets. This was long after he was out of leadership as vice president. But that they would all be sitting there cooling for the vice president or former vice president. So that's the kind of thing that will continue. The ruling elite, they get to pollute like crazy. Their yachts, their private jets, those will continue. In fact, there'll be a lot more of them. And that's, you see people like the Biden family or Hunter Biden that's gotten close to oligarchs in Russia, in Ukraine, and made money off the Chinese Communist Party, because they're in charge in China, let's face it. But isn't it interesting that if you look at the policies and the things that this administration has done, who's benefited? Yeah, they talk a lot of trash about Russia, but at the same time, by President Biden basically going to war with energy companies in the U.S., he has so driven up the price of oil and natural gas that Russia's been able to fund their invasion of and war with Ukraine. And then we got $13 billion passed in this House, then another $40 billion. I voted for the 13. I didn't vote for the 40 because it didn't appear to me there was enough restraint on what President Biden could do with the money. And, it made big headlines in the last few weeks when Biden administration announced, we're going to provide $820 million to Ukraine. Well, you have $53 billion to work with, and you're trickling out $820 million while Russia is making big advances in Ukraine. For heaven's sake, that was one of the reasons I didn't vote for the $40 billion, because I figured that the Biden administration would find other things to do with it. Apparently, they want to have a lot more sex change surgeries in the military. They cost a lot of money. They don't cost $40 billion if you had sex change for everybody in the military. And by the way, that does put our military members in a category where they're not able to be utilized for military services. Last I saw, they stayed in that category where you couldn't deploy them until such time as a psychiatrist could certify that they were comfortable in their new gender. Amazing. No wonder we're losing respect around the world when we're not spending defense money on defense. We're spending it on social experimentation. So we see these bills coming. We see what's happening. All you have to do is look from a historical perspective. The discussion about, the gasoline is actually cheaper now than it was at the end of the Bush administration. My gosh, we just went through TARP being passed, $700 billion. Well, yeah, that's going to cause some inflation. And then along came the Obama administration, Obama-Biden, and they got another $900 billion on top of having a majority of the $700 billion still to spend. They were throwing money at things right and left that would help them get reelected. And so I wouldn't be bragging about a whole lot. In fact, I'd seen an article indicating that during the 8 years of the Obama-Biden administration, the average black household in America during Obama-Biden 8 years, the average black household lost 30% of their net worth, which really helped bring a great deal of light and emphasis on candidate Donald Trump's question to a large black audience: what do you got to lose by voting for me? What do you got to lose? You just lost 30% of your net worth under the Democrats. And lo and behold, the average gained net worth under the 4 years of President Trump. So people, I think, are starting to look at those kind of numbers again, and I think it's important to do so. So back to our hearing yesterday, they kept saying that gun manufacturers were given immunity like nobody else in America. And it was my honor to get to illuminate that issue for those that hadn't thought through what they were saying and didn't realize that it was not true. So, first of all, a very timely topic that many of us think has long outlived its usefulness is the massive immunity that's been given to the pharmaceutical industry for the vaccinations that they've made tens of billions of dollars just in a year. Man, they've made so much money off those, so much so that they looked around. Most people have gotten the vaccination. They hate to see somebody have natural immunity from having had COVID because they're not as vulnerable to getting COVID again as apparently people are that have had the vaccinations and all the boosters. So what do? Oh, let's go after the young people under 5 years of age. These are people that statistically, you would say, they don't even have a statistical chance of getting COVID and passing away. They were the least vulnerable among us when it comes to COVID. And that's who they want to give a jab to and boosters, even though we're seeing more and more indications that immunity ends up being compromised in many people who get the boosters, that it doesn't seem to help with immunity to new strains of COVID. And Democrats were more than thrilled, it seems, to give them all kinds of immunity. When I saw the huge unfolded warnings that come with the vaccination, I said to the pharmacist, where are all the warnings? They know about a lot of things that go wrong with these. We know about it from the VAERS reports of so many things that have gone wrong, starting with blood clots and going from there. He said, no, it says up there, it's because it's emergency use authorization. Not only do they have complete immunity to any lawsuit for damages, for deaths they cause, they don't even have to warn you of all the damages that they know can result from the vaccinations or the boosters. Don't even have to warn you. So my friends in judiciary yesterday, because they kept saying, nobody else gets this kind of immunity, they just weren't aware. Because, I know the rules. We're here in the House of Representatives. You can't attribute intentionally lying to anybody. And that's why I'm sure that they just forgot or weren't aware of all the immunities that they've provided to other entities. But that's the pharmaceutical. They don't even have to warn you, give you a heads up of what's coming, potentially with a vaccination or a booster. And then you got social media. And that Section 230 has allowed some of the richest companies in the world and individuals in the world to completely escape liability. They should be made to answer in court for fraud, for so many of the things that they have done, for censorship, for taking away people's rights that they were told they had under the social media. But anyway, even though I know that my Democrat friends were not talking about Section 230 immunity, there it is. And of course, they don't want to bother that, because that allows all the Democrats controlling these massive social media giants to censor and help at election time and help Democrats get elected. So they want to leave that immunity in place when it needs to go. We need to just eliminate Section 230. We were told, well, that was important to have to allow them to get started. Well, listen, they're started, and they're some of the most powerful companies in the history of the world. Some would say more powerful than the U.S. government itself because of all the information they have. It's time to get rid of their immunity from liability.